An audio recording of the Kojiki, or Record of Ancient Matters. Part 3. Amaterasu, the Sun Goddess and the Storm God. Investiture of the three deities, the illustrious August children. At this time, His Augustness, the male who invites, greatly rejoiced, saying, I, begetting child after child, have at my final begetting gotten three illustrious children. With which words, at once jinglingly taking off and shaking the jewel string forming his august necklace, be bestowed it on Amaterasu, the heaven-shining great august deity, saying, Do thine augustness rule the plane of high heaven. With this charge he bestowed it on her. Now the name of this august necklace was the August Storehouse Shelf Deity. Next he said to his augustness, Moon Night Possessor, Do thine augustness rule the dominion of the night. Thus he charged him. Next he said to his brave, swift, impetuous male augustness, Do thine augustness rule the sea plain. The crying and weeping of his impetuous male augustness. So while the other two deities each assumed his and her role according to the command with which her father had deigned to charge them, the storm god, his swift, impetuous male augustness, did not assume the role of the dominion with which he had been charged, but cried and wept till his 8-grasped beard reached to the pit of his stomach. The fashion of his weeping was such as by his weeping to wither the green mountains into withered mountains, and by his weeping to dry up all the rivers and seas. For this reason, the sound of bad deities was like unto the flies in the 5th moon as they all swarmed, and in all things every portent of woe arose. So the great august deity, the male who invites, said to his swift impetuous male augustness, How is it that, instead of ruling the land with which I charge thee, thou dost wail and weep? He replied, saying, I wail because I wish to depart to my deceased mother's land, to the nether distant land. Then the great august deity, the male who invites, was very angry, and said, If that be so, thou shalt not dwell in this land, and forthwith expelled him with a divine expulsion. So the great deity, the male who invites, dwells in Taga in Afumi. The August Oath. So thereupon his swift impetuous male augustness said, If that be so, I will take leave of the heaven-shining great august deity and depart. With these words he forthwith went up to heaven, whereupon all the mountains and rivers shook, and every land and country quaked. So the heaven-shining great august deity, alarmed at the noise, said, The reason of the ascent hither of his augustness, my elder brother, is surely of no good intent. It is only that he wishes to wrest my land from me. And she forthwith, unbinding her august hair, twisted it into august bunches, and both into the left and into the right august bunch, as likewise into her august headdress, and likewise onto her left and her right august arm. She twisted an augustusly complete string of curved jewels 8 feet long, of 500 jewels, and slinging on her back a quiver holding 1,000 arrows, and adding thereto a quiver holding 500 arrows. She likewise took and slung at her side a mighty and high-sounding elbow pad, and brandished and stuck her bow upright, so that the top shook, and she stamped her feet into the hard ground up to her opposing thighs, kicking away the earth like rotten snow, and stood valiantly, like unto a mighty man, and waiting asked, Wherefore ascendest thou hither? Then his swift impetuous male augustness replied, saying, I have no evil intent. It is only that when the great august deity our father spoke, deigning to inquire the cause of my wailing and weeping, I said, I wail because I wish to go to my deceased mother's land. Whereupon the great august deity said, Thou shalt not dwell in this land, and deign to expel me with a divine expulsion. It is therefore solely with the thought of taking leave of thee and departing that I have ascended hither. I have no strange intentions. Then the heaven-shining great august deity said, If that be so, whereby shall I know the sincerity of thy intentions? Thereupon his swift impetuous male augustness replied, saying, Let each of us swear and produce children. So as they then swore to each other from the opposite banks of the tranquil river of heaven, the august names of the deities that were born from the mist of her breath, when, having first begged his swift impetuous male augustness to hand her the 10-grasped saber, which was girdled on him, and broken into 3 fragments, and with the jewels making a jingling sound, having brandished and washed them in the true pool well of heaven, and having crunchingly crunched them, the heaven-shining great deity blew them away, with her augustness Torrent Mist Princess, another august name, for whom is her augustness Princess of the Island of the Offering, next her augustness Lovely Island Princess, another august name, for whom is her augustness Good Princess, next her augustness Princess of the Torrent, the august name of the deity that was born from the mist of his breath, when having begged the heaven-shining great august deity to hand him the augustly complete string of curved jewels 8 feet long, of 500 jewels, that was twisted in the left august bunch of her hair, and with the jewels making a jingling sound, having brandished and washed them in the true pool well of heaven, and having crunchingly crunched them, his swift impetuous male augustness blew them away, with his augustness, truly conqueror, I conqueror, conquering swift heavenly great ears, the august name of the deity that was born from the mist of his breath, when again having begged her to hand him the jewels that were twisted in the right august bunch of her hair, and having crunchingly crunched them, he blew them away with his augustness Ame no Hohi, the august name of the deity that was born from the mist of his breath, when again having begged her to hand him the jewels that were twisted in her august headdress, and having crunchingly crunched them, he blew them away, was his augustness Prince Lord of Heaven, the august name of the deity that was born from the mist of his breath, when again having begged her to hand him the jewels that were twisted on her left august arm, and having crunchingly crunched them, he blew them away, with his augustness Prince Lord of Life, the august name of the deity that was born from the mist of his breath, when again, having begged her to hand him the jewels that were twisted on her right august arm, and having crunchingly crunched them, he blew them away with his wondrous augustness of Kumanu, 5 deities in all. The august declaration of the division of the august male children and the august female children. Thereupon the heavenly shining great august deity said to his swift impetuous male augustness, As for the seed of the 5 male deities born last, their birth was from things of mine, so undoubtedly they are my children. As for the seed of the 3 female deities born first, their birth was from a thing of thine, so doubtless they are thy children. Thus did she declare the division. So her augustness, Torrent Mist Princess, the deity born first, dwells in the inner temple of Munakata. The next, her augustness, Lovely Island Princess, dwells in the middle temple of Munakata. The next, her augustness, Princess of the Torrent, dwells in the outer temple of Munakata. These 3 deities are of the 3 great deities held in reverence by the dukes of Munakata. So his augustness, brave rustic illuminator, child of his augustness, Ame no Hohi, one of the 5 children born afterward. This is the ancestor of the rulers of the land of Izumo, of the rulers of the land of Musashi, of the rulers of the upper land of Unakami, of the rulers of the lower land of Unakami, of the rulers of the land Ishimu, of the departmental suzerains of the island of Tsu, and of the rulers of the land of Tobotsu Afumi. The next, his augustness, Prince Lord of Heaven, is the ancestor of the rulers of the land of Ofushi Kafuchi, of the chiefs of Nukatabe no Yomi, the chiefs of Nukatabe no Yue, of the rulers of the land of Ki, of the suzerains of Tanaka in Yamato, of the rulers of the land of Yamashiro, of the rulers of the land of Umaguta, of the rulers of the land of Kine in Michinoshiri, of the rulers of the land of Suharu, of the rulers of Amuchi in Yamato, of the departmental suzerains, of the departmental suzerains of Takechi, of the territorial lords of Kamafu, and of the rulers of Sakikusabe. The august revenges of his impetuous male augustness. Then his swift impetuous male augustness said to the heaven-shining great august deity, "Owing to the sincerity of my intentions, I have, in begetting children, gotten delicate females. Judging from this, I have undoubtedly gained the victory." With these words, the impetuous with victory, he broke down the divisions of the rice fields laid out by the heaven-shining great august deity, filled up the ditches, and moreover strewed excrements in the palace where she partook of the great food. So, though he did thus, the heaven-shining great august deity upbraided him not, but said, "What looks like excrements must be something that his augustness, mine elder brother, has vomited through drunkenness." Again, as to his breaking down the divisions of the rice fields and filling up the ditches, it must be because he grudges the land they occupy that his augustness, mine elder brother, acts thus. But, notwithstanding these apologetic words, he still continued his evil acts, and was more and more violent. As the heaven-shining great august deity sat in her awful weaving hall, seeing to the weaving of the august garments of the deities, he broke a hole in the top of the weaving hall, and through it let fall a heavenly piebald horse, which he had flayed with the backward flaying, at whose sight the women weaving the heavenly garments were so much alarmed they died of fear. The door of the heavenly rock dwelling. So thereupon the heaven-shining great august deity, terrified at the sight, closed behind her the door of the heavenly rock dwelling, made it fast, and retired. Then the whole plain of high heaven was obscured, and all the central land of reed plains darkened. Owing to this, eternal night prevailed. Hereupon the voices of the myriad deities were like unto the flies in the fifth moon as they swarmed, and a myriad portents of woe all arose. Thereupon did the 800 myriad deities assemble in a divine assembly in the bed of the tranquil river of heaven, and bid the deity, thought includer, child of the high august producing wondrous deity, think of a plan, assembling the long singing birds of eternal night, and making them sing, taking the hard rocks of heaven from the riverbed of the tranquil river of heaven, and taking the iron from the heavenly metal mountains, calling in the smith Amatsumara, charging her augustness Ishikori Domi to make a mirror, and charging his augustness jewel ancestor to make his augustly complete string of curved jewels 8 feet long, 500 jewels, and summoning his augustness, heavenly beconing ancestor lord, and his augustness great jewel, and causing them to pull out with a complete pulling the shoulder blade of a true stag from the heavenly Mount Kagu, and take cherry bark from the heavenly Mount Kagu, and perform divination, and pulling up by pulling its roots a true Cleyera japonica with 500 branches from the heavenly Mount Kage, and taking and putting upon its upper branches the augustly complete string of curved jewels 8 feet long and 500 jewels, and taking and tying to the middle branches the mirror 8 feet long, and taking and hanging upon its lower branches the white pacificatory offerings, and the blue pacificatory offering, his augustness grand jewel, taking these divers things and holding them together with the great august offerings, and his augustness heavenly beckoning ancestor Lord, prayerfully reciting grand liturgies, and the heavenly hand strength male deity standing hidden beside the door, and her augustness heavenly alarming female, baiting round her the heavenly club moss, the heavenly Mount Kagu as a sash, and making the heavenly spindle tree her headdress, and binding the leaves of the bamboo grass of the heavenly Mount Kagu in a posy for her hands, and laying a sounding board before the door of the heavenly rock dwelling, and stamping till she made it resound, and doing as if possessed by a deity, and pulling out the nipples of her breasts, pushing down her skirt stream. Ask you ad private parts. Then the plain of high heaven shook, and the 800 myriad deities laughed together. Hereupon the heaven shining great august deity was greatly amazed, and slightly opening the door of the heavenly rock dwelling, spoke thus from the inside. Methought that owing to my retirement the plain of heaven would be dark, and likewise the central land of reed plains would all be dark. How then is it that the heavenly alarming female makes merry, and then likewise the 800 myriad deities all laugh? Then the heavenly alarming female spoke, saying, We rejoice and are glad, because there is a deity more illustrious than thine augustness. While she was thus speaking, his augustness, heavenly beckoning ancestor Lord, and his augustness, grand jewel, pushed forward the mirror and respectfully showed it to the heaven shining great august deity, whereupon the heaven shining great august deity, more and more astonished, gradually came forth from the door and gazed upon it, whereupon the heavenly hand strength male deity, who was standing hidden, took her august hand and drew her out, and then his augustness grand jewel drew the bottom tied rope along at her august back and spoke, saying, Thou must not go back further in than this. So when the heaven shining great august deity had come forth, both the plain of high heaven and the central land of reed plains, of course, again became light. The august expulsion of his impetuous male augustness. Thereupon the 800 myriad deities took counsel together, and imposed on high swift impetuous male augustness a fine of 1,000 tables, and likewise cut his beard, and even caused the nails of his fingers and toes to be pulled off, and expelled him with the divine expulsion. Again he begged food of the deity princess of great food. Then the princess of great food took out all sorts of dainty things from her nose, and her mouth, and her fundament, and made them up into all sorts of dishes, which she offered to him. But his swift impetuous male augustness watched her proceedings, considered that she was offering up to him filth, and at once killed the deity princess of great food. So the things that were born in the body of the deity who had been killed were as follows. In her head were born silkworms. In her 2 eyes were born rice seeds. In her 2 ears were born millet. In her nose were born small beans. In her private parts were born barley. In her fundament were born large beans. So his augustness, the deity producing wondrous ancestor, caused them to be taken and used as seeds. The 8-forked serpent. So, having been expelled, his swift impetuous male augustness descended to a place called Torikami, at the headwaters of the river Hi in the land of Izumo. At this time, some chopsticks came floating down the stream. So his swift impetuous male augustness, thinking that there must be people at the headwaters of the river, went up it in quest of them. When he came upon an old man and an old woman, 2 of them, who had a young girl between them, and were weeping. Then he deigned to ask, Who are ye? So the old man replied, saying, I am an earthly deity, child of the deity, great mountain possessor. I am called by the name of foot-stroking elder. My wife is called by the name of hand-stroking elder, and my daughter is called by the name of wondrous Inada princess. Again he asked, What is the cause of your crying? The old man answered, saying, I had originally 8 young girls as daughters, but the 8-forked serpent Okoshi has come every year and devoured one, and it is now its time to come, whereupon we weep. Then he asked him, "What is its form like?" The old man answered, saying, "Its eyes are like Akakagachi. It has one body with 8 heads and 8 tails. Moreover, on its body grows moss, and also Kamaikaparis and Cryptomyrias. Its length extends over 8 valleys and 8 hills, and if one look at its belly, it is all constantly blood and inflamed." What is called here Akagagachi is the modern Hohotsuki. Then his swift, impetuous male Augustness said to the old man, "If this be thy daughter, wilt thou offer her to me?" He replied, saying, "With reverence, but I know not thine august name." Then he replied, saying, "I am elder brother to the heaven-shining great august deity, so I have now descended from heaven." Then the deities, foot-stroking elder and hand-stroking elder, said, "If that be so, with reverence will we offer her to thee." So his swift, impetuous male Augustness, at once taking and changing the young woman into a multitudinous and close-toothed comb, which he stuck into his august hair bunch, said to the deities, foot-stroking elder and hand-stroking elder, "Do you distill some 8-fold refined liquor? Also make a fence round about. In that fence make 8 gates, and at each gate tie together 8 platforms. On each platform put a liquor vat, and into each vat pour the 8-fold refined liquor and wait." So as they waited, after having thus prepared everything in accordance with his bidding, the 8-forked serpent came truly as the old man had said, and immediately dipped a head into each vat, and drank the liquor. Thereupon it was intoxicated with drinking, and all the heads lay down and slept. Then his swift, impetuous male Augustness drew the 10-grasped saber that was augustly girdled on him, and cut the serpent in pieces, so that the river he flowed on changed into a river of blood. So when he cut the middle tail, the edge of his august sword broke. Then, thinking it strange, he thrust into and split the flesh with the point of his august sword, and looked, and there was a great sword within. So he took this great sword, and thinking it a strange thing, he respectfully informed the heaven-shining great august deity, "This is the herb-quelling great sword." The Palace of Suga. So thereupon his swift, impetuous male Augustness sought in the land of Izumo for a place where he might build a palace. Then he arrived at a place called Suga, and said, "On coming to this place my august heart is pure," and in that place he built a palace to dwell in, so that the place is now called Suga. When this great deity first built the palace of Suga, clouds rose up thence. Then he made an august song. That song said, "8 clouds arise. The 8-fold fence of Uzumo makes an 8-fold fence for the spouses to retire within. Oh, that 8-fold fence!" This difficult song has been rather differently rendered by Mr. Aston in the second appendix to his Grammar of the Japanese Written Language. Mr. Aston translates it thus: "Many clouds arise. The clouds which come forth are a manifold fence for the husband and wife to retire within. They have formed a manifold fence. Oh, that manifold fence!"